In this video, I'm gonna talk about Quake 4. I do not remember the game being this ugly. It had been sitting within my memory as something that looked pretty great at the time, and the first one I could not run at ultra settings on whichever graphics card I had at the time. Then again, I recall having a silent graphics card back then. Did you know these existed? I kid you not. Graphics card without a fan. They work exactly as well as you think they do. The game needs a bit of context because it is not defined by what it is, but rather what it is not. ID Software had their Skyrim moment long before it happened, and sought to create a gritty, semi-realistic experience with their newly arrived Doom 3. In the process, they forgot that they were designing a video game. The end result was a product that was dark in the literal rather than the figurative sense. Thus became the clockwork for the entire playthrough. Hold a flashlight in your hand so you can see where you are going. Come up to a door. Step forward to get it to open. Immediately whip out the shotgun and blind fire into the opening at the monster that was, statistically, behind in ambush and waiting to jump on you. For reasons that are still unknown even to the most brilliant minds of our generation, the player base did not take too kindly to that sort of gameplay, and Doom 3 became the laughingstock just as John Romero's Daikatana was reaching the end of its legal term. If anything, at least Doom 3 had a good sense of timing, and it was even kind enough to produce a box office bomb the year after the game came out. Therefore, the developers' challenge was simple. Make not Doom 3. Learn the lessons from the predecessor's mistakes, and use the knowledge to create a new, better game that recaptures the feeling of being fast and powerful, while following as few of those pesky laws of physics as possible. The developers fulfilled the requirement by attaching the flashlight to your second weakest weapon. Let me open a parenthesis. Back in high school, I had such a disastrous math test that I scored 8%. Predictably, I was brought home and given a verbal curb stomp that would have flustered drill instructor Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. I was told in no uncertain terms that I needed to significantly improve my performance, or else everything between my waist and my thighs would become mashed potatoes the hard way. The next quarter, I brought back a test to the tune of 55%. The teacher wrote to my parents and said, sarcastically jubilant, "I am delighted to report that Shuri has shown a marked improvement in his test scores in my class." Then again, practically anything is better than 8%. All of these paragraphs of bullshit bring me to the strange beast here present. I believe we can all agree that the bar had been set roughly knee-high and that making a passable product was the only expectation under the circumstance, even if we were fresh off the pure fun-filled mayhem of Quake 3 Arena. Even if Half-Life 2 had come out the year prior and made every other video game its bitch. Mistake number 1 was to set the bar too low. When you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. It is a wisdom that is universally known across all work markets, except in middle management, and thus explains the final result of the product at hand. It rides on an established brand name, but it embodies the latter stages of a pump and dump scheme after everyone has realized that the investment has overextended its welcome. Your name is Gun McMarine. Nobody cares what your actual name is because you look like all the other NPCs in the opening cutscene. You are in the army. You are attacking the home base of a bunch of biomechanical nightmares, and enough of the initial plan goes south in order to fill the traditional 8 hours of gameplay. Grab your gun, walk through the environment, shoot everything that moves, and even some things that do not. It is about as average as it gets. Which, actually, is the problem. The game arrived in a time period when players jerked off to novelty, and the gold standards had been established at least a year prior. Storytelling was being taken seriously. Everybody and their grandmother were incorporating physics elements, and care was being applied to level design so as to propose challenges that did not entirely consist of a contest of twitch reflexes peppered with a pile of ammo and healing items right before the lair of a boss fight in which you will lose at least 3/4 of your health through no fault of your own. In all of this, our Exhibit A arrives with its lumbering, old-school, body-on-frame, column shifter, Ford Lincoln Mercury, liver and onions experience, all wrapped inside a packaging of supposed newness, which stands in bizarre contrast to the well-meaning but haphazard implementation of novelty in Doom 3. In attempting to make corrections to the design, the developers ended up correcting the wrong things. Swimming in the worst of both worlds is a clunky slugfest in which I feel like I never have the right weapon out at any moment, and the overwhelming majority of the time is spent shooting the most basic arsenal, because the constant close quarters mean that the grenade and rocket launchers are more lethal to you than to the enemy. The famous railgun is patently useless in all situations, and the BFG is not even called a BFG anymore. It leaves me with the ability to run and gun and bunny hop madly, just like in the olden days, except I cannot, because the maps are shaped around a SWAT team intervention. I cannot see anything because the engine is the same as Doom 3 and the flashlight only gets me so far, and that is why I go into the settings and enable the forced ambient light, which has the side effect of getting rid of all the atmospheric shadows and making the game's art direction look like it was put together in 1998 when The Undertaker threw mankind off hell in a cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. There is, or was, a multiplayer component, and although it still functions perfectly well, there is pretty much nobody playing it. I gave the mode a glance at random hours of the day, and I could see maybe 3 or 4 people on any given server at once, but unsurprisingly, that component of the game was well past its prime and is best reserved for nostalgic LAN parties, if people still do that anyway. The only people who will play this game today will be the people who have already played it before, and they are hoping for a taste of the good old days, back when their nation still possessed its former glory. It is the necessary wake-up call that they need to realize that the original heroes have long since left the company, and all that remains behind are poor imitations at the original recipe made up of 1 part incompetence and 1 part corporate cost-cutting.
Roger that, HQ. Rhino Squad out.
In short, this game is Kentucky Fried Chicken.